This is episode 1 of the Play Your Position podcast.
Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count. Here's your host, Mary Lou Kaser. Let's get started.
Well, hello and welcome. I am super excited to introduce my guest today, Larry Bowman. Larry currently works as a mentor with a program he helped design and develop that helps people who are looking for jobs become the best job seekers and job candidates they possibly can. Larry has a background in education and coaching, as well as being the owner and president of his own company, LMB Unlimited. He's a proud father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, and continues to share his message and passion with the world. So, Larry, are you ready for kickoff?
I'm ready. Always ready for kickoff.
Great. On a quick side note, Larry and I go way back to our days of teaching together in the English department at Lake Oswego High School here in Oregon. And when I was a rookie teacher, I looked to Larry as a mentor and a coach because he knew the ropes and I needed help because I was learning all the plays of being a high school English teacher and really had a lot of questions. And we had some good years together, didn't we, Larry?
Yeah, we did. It was fun. I learned a lot from you too. So,
well, let's dive right in and have you tell your story. Specifically, what position you play exceptionally well, and especially the part when you recognized what position best suited you for your life's mission and purpose.
Probably to go to that point, I just need to go back and look at the fact that I was born in Virginia, raised in Wyoming, and had my career in Oregon. So I had 3 different backgrounds and cultures and all kinds of experiences. Learning about teaching was after I flunked out of college and gone to community college, had an advisor who moved me in a direction that I didn't think I wanted to move in, and that was ended up in English, teaching English. And I didn't think I liked to read or write at that time. So that kind of got me started, and I just kept learning from different mentors and people along the way and got to the point and realized that's what I love to do. I love to help people think and consider possibilities and ultimately, figured out I love to help people help themselves get better.
Great. And who was an instrumental coach or mentor for you? Someone who influenced you in becoming a teacher and a coach, or just in general?
There have been several different people, but going back to the community college time, my advisor at that time, and he seemed to know more about me than I knew. His name was Jim Wan, and ultimately he ended up becoming an administrator and a nationally recognized administrator for creative programs and things in school. But he helped me get started in pushing me into classes about philosophy and humanities and literature and things that. And he told me that I would enjoy that, and ultimately I did. As a result of that, he helped me get my first teaching job in Moreland, Wyoming, and that started my career for me. So as far as education, he was one. My grandfather probably was one of the biggest mentors I had. My grandfather Bond, worked with him a great deal when I was in second grade, stayed with him. He helped me get the foundation for the values that I have. And then Boyd Crawford, when I was at Lake Oswego High School, was certainly a mentor for me. And then Brad Biggert, who's a business associate, that's been one of my top mentors. So those are just some of the people that have had an impact on me.
And what would you say, Larry, are the threads that hold all those mentors together? If you could really zero in on a quality or characteristic, what would you say you noticed in the men who have shaped your life?
Well, I think, first of all, I recognize that they really cared about me. Even though I might not like what they were saying, I knew that they cared about me. I knew I could trust them. And I think those are the factors that allowed me to open up and listen to them. My grandfather always taught me, he said, you really need to learn how to understand people and care about them, because they all have something important going on in their lives. So that was probably the start of it, and these other people just reinforced that. And they taught me also that you can't help anybody till they trust you. And that was one of the big keys for me.
Yeah, trust is something that we read about a lot these days. It's a buzzword, particularly in the business world. Stephen Covey, before he passed on, helped author that book, The Speed of Trust.
Right.
and how long it takes to build trust and how quickly it can be taken away.
And that was one of the key things when I started teaching. And I realized that the kids would not learn from me until they could trust me. And so I had to become trustworthy.
Right. So let's transition into what I consider the heart of our conversation. It's the section called Move the Chains, where we really dive into the ups and downs that life gives us, those interceptions, those fumbles, those triumphs too. You know, when we make a play that surprised us, or, you know, that came at us out of nowhere. Keeping with that trust theme, because I think it's so important these days. It just can't be talked about enough. Talk about a time when you either yourself experienced, on a positive or even when you saw a loss of trust, when you witnessed that, and it might have happened to you or it might have happened to somebody that you saw, and what were some ways that, you know, you handled that situation?
Well, that's a great question. I think in terms of that, probably along the way, and with the coaches I had in football, I was a pretty good athlete, and I loved playing football. And so the coaches I had in high school and in college, and that I eventually worked with, all helped me along the way. When I screwed up, they were there to bring me along and help me out. One thing I think back on is a principal I had in Laramie, Wyoming, Gene Chasey, who and I was a young teacher. He was there to when I made some mistakes in handling a child and handling the parent and so forth, and he called us in, got us together, and then he sent when the parent left, he looked at me, he said, "Okay, now I had your back on this one, but I want you to learn from it so you don't make the same mistake again." And that was really important to me, because even though I'd goofed up and made a mistake, he trusted me, and he let me know he was going to stand behind me as long as I was willing to grow and change. The impact that he had on me in terms of becoming the person I am today.
Yeah, those kinds of early experiences in our careers, I think, are really life-changing. You candidly shared how you were in a situation that thought it was supposed to go one way and it turned out not to.
Right.
And, you know, I'd like you to speak more about, because you've not only been in education, Larry, but you've also worked in the business world, and
Right.
You've worked with a lot of business people, and kind of carrying that theme a little bit further. What do you see people struggling with a lot these days in terms of finding their place and growing within an organization or within a career path, like within their position? They might not stay with the same company or the same organization, but where are those struggles that you've witnessed? And if you want to draw on yourself, you certainly can.
One of the things that we do with our Job Seekers program, and we started that after I retired in 1994, and our whole goal was to go by the mission statement of "We help you help yourself get better." And one of the challenges that we always have with people, and I found it in teaching, but I found it with the adults in the Job Seekers program, is you ask them, "Who are you and what's important to you?" And they really have never thought about that much. They've just gone along and done the things that they've been taught to do to become a good employee or whatever. They've never thought about their own personal values, what that means to them in the job, what that means to them in relationships. I think that's one of the key areas that we need to work with, and we continually work with on our job seekers. Once we can help them figure that out, then they begin to get a focus for what they want to do and where they want to go, and they move along much easier. When I flunked out of college and had to make those choices, what do I do now? I was 19 years old. And, you know, and all of a sudden I realized that I could be a bum. I could take a low-paying job. I could go in the military. I'd go to community college, whatever. There was no war going on, so I went to community college, and that turned my whole life around. So I think we have those choices at that point to begin to figure out who I am and what matters to me and what the values are that I hold. And that directed my whole career and what I've done since I retired.
So why do you suppose it's difficult for so many people to figure out what you just described? You know, there's always the few lucky ones that, or so to speak, lucky ones that we see perhaps paraded in the media that they seem to have always known. But a lot of people really do struggle with figuring out which position to play in life or which career path to follow. Where do you think the root of that comes from?
Well, you know, I think a lot of it has to do with what we've done as parents at times. You know, we kind of start trying to direct the kids in the direction we think they ought to go. Education in the 20th century, we began to teach people how to be good employees and talk to them in terms of that. Here's what you learn, here are the skills you have, here's how you apply those. but we never dealt with them or rarely ever started dealing with them in terms of what's really important to you. I think I learned that from one of my students who wasn't doing very well in my class, and I sat down and asked him one day, what's important to you? And he started talking about that, and I said, why is that important? And he had some really good reasons for it. And from that point on, we began to focus on where he wanted to go with what was important to him, and he changed. And I think what happens in our culture sometimes is we find the culture and other people influencing us to move towards what they want for us, and they don't ever ask us and let us begin to discover what we want for ourselves. And I hear all the negative stuff about young people and so forth, but then I see all the good things that young people are doing, with all of my grandkids and stuff. And I'm able to be around young people all the time and see the hard work they put in, the concern they have, and compassion they have for other people. And that's always missed out because the media never ever reports that. They or very rarely do they do that. I just see real value in the young people, but there's a frustration because they don't know what's going to happen here in the 21st century. They don't see the work world as we saw it in the 20th century. They need to understand that they're going to have to change, but they can bring something to it that the older people can't bring to it as well. It goes back to the respect for themselves and respect for others that will create that.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. And as much as I hate to admit it, being a former educator, a public educator, that the system has been structured for exactly that, and not for the bigger questions and directing our young people. And then our young people grow up to become adults and figure they spend quite a bit of their time, lost. Or I've witnessed that just this tremendous amount of people, trying on different positions. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're younger, I think. Not that you can't reinvent yourself when you're older. I think
Right.
That's part of being a human being as well. But staying grounded in those values and that big why.
Right.
Why are you doing what you're doing, and always being clear about that. And it just seems like there's a lot of confusion.
One of our job seekers, and this is a prime example of this, I think, is she was working extremely hard, but seemed to be very frustrated, didn't seem to be very happy about anything. And when I asked her one day, I said, how many jobs have you had? And she said 5. And I said, which one did you like the best? She said, I hated every one of them. And I went, wow, why is that? I said, because you're applying for the same kind of job. And she thought about it a minute, and she's, well, I always did what my dad told me to do, what I needed to major in, what jobs I needed to take, and I always took those, and I didn't like them. And I said, well, why are you applying for the same thing then? And she said, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I asked this question. I said, do you think you're old enough to make up your own mind? And she was 51, and all of a sudden she broke down and started crying because she'd never, ever really thought about that. And once we started talking about what she wanted and the skills she had to do that, she got all excited. Her whole demeanor changed. So ultimately started dressing differently, wearing her hair differently, wearing a smile all the time. Within 3 months, she had a job doing what she wanted to do.
That is a fantastic story, and it gave me chills because at 51, I think some people believe the game's over. They can't even get on the field anymore, let alone run with the ball. But that is a great, great example of it's always possible to suit up. Maybe you're just wearing the wrong uniform.
Yeah, I think that's part throughout my life. I guess I go back to my grandfather's teaching when I spent time with him. He probably was the most influential person in my life because he taught me about my faith, my religion, and as a result of that, it became a part of everything I became down the line. But that was the foundation for it. I always wanted to see myself being better and doing better, but I always remember what he said. Remember to care about the people you're working with because they're the most important. It all began to fit together when I started teaching and beginning to figure that out. And I was probably like you when my first year of teaching, when I made so many mistakes that the kids had to straighten me out. So, you think back on those experiences and how you begin to grow from there and how you begin to figure out who you are, then you can begin to impact others in that same way.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And speaking of impact, let's move that ball into the end zone, Larry, and score a touchdown. What I know listeners like are takeaways, things that they can use either right now or file away for the future. So what are 1 to 3, and feel free to go 3, what are 1 to 3 what I call those key offensive strategies straight out of the Larry Bowman playbook that listeners could use right away to get their ball into the end zone, either life or business?
I think they're all the same. They go together. I think the first thing is learning to listen to people. Really listen. And that means a good friend of mine told me this one time. He said, "Larry, remember, when you're talking, you're not learning anything," which told me that, Larry, you need to listen more. And that became very key to me, is learning how to listen to people and what they're really saying, and then figuring out how I can help them in what they want to do or where they want to go. So really becoming a good listener, I think, is key. Once again, establishing that relationship, that bond that says, I trust you and I know you're a good person. I want to help you trust me, so we can work together, and how can we help each other. And then I think the last one, and it kind of falls together, is being able to say, here's who I am and here's my purpose and mission in life. Here's what I want to accomplish. But you have to build those other things to get to that point. And I guess for me, I figured that out when I began to realize that I like helping people help themselves get better. So whatever I do, whatever field I'm in, that's my goal. That's what I want to do. But I had to learn that by listening to others, listening to myself, building a sense of trust and relationships. And then the other begins to say, here's my purpose in life, here's what I want to do.
Wow, all of those, Larry, are just such important messages that we cannot hear enough. I know I can't hear them enough, especially the one about saying to the world, hello world, this is me, and love it or leave it,
Here's who I am.
I am here, and this is what I'm doing, and that's just how it is. And it takes some people a lifetime to get to that point, and others are more fortunate and can figure it out when they're younger. I don't know if there's a secret ingredient to figuring it out when they're younger, but touched on some things. Parents play a role, grandparents, the people who are influential in our lives at a young age, including our teachers and coaches. And
yeah, and part of it is taking time to reflect. We never take time to think about what's going on in our lives and why it's happening. That's a key thing that I learned when I was teaching, as I observed students and then thought back to myself. I said, I think the thing that made me a good teacher was that I was such a poor student. I didn't do all the right things. I didn't, but somehow I changed because of people's influence on me, and people began to have confidence and faith in me. And I had to grow through that and get to that point where I had to say, here's who I am and here's how I can help you. Do you want help or don't you want help? And go from there. But I think everything I've done in my life and continue to do is all built around that. How can I help people have a sense of value and a sense of worth and a sense of joy in their life?
Yeah, and you have done that. Knowing you for as long as I have, I can attest to that. That is something you have definitely mastered. So, well, Larry, everything that you talked about today can be found in the show notes at maryloukaser.com/Larry, because you have shared some incredible insights and wisdom with listeners. And before we go, I want to give you the chance to share with listeners today, how can they connect with you? What are some ways to find Larry Bowman?
Check out my LinkedIn site. It gives some information there. They're always welcome to come check out our Job Seekers program at Lake Grove Presbyterian Church. We have Monday meetings from 8:30 to 10:30 and get an idea of what we do. We actually have 17 different mentors who we work one-on-one with each of our job seekers. They can come and see the challenges the job seekers have. I've got my business going. We have business meetings going every other weekend. We do little short seminars over at Club Sport and Tiger. One coming up this next Wednesday from 8 to about 9:30. So those are ways that people could connect with me. And I'm always open to talk to people and see what I can do to help.
Fantastic. And you are one of the most generous and thoughtful people I've ever had the honor of knowing. And I want to thank you for your time today, Larry, and for most of all, your friendship. I'm excited that we've been able to reconnect, and I'm really very impressed with the program that you have designed and developed over at Lake Grove. And for listeners who are not in the local area to Portland, Oregon, I definitely encourage you to connect with Larry on LinkedIn and learn more about this guy, because he is everything he says he is and more.
Thank you, Mary Lou. It's been a joy for me. It's always fun talking with you because you're so excited about life yourself, and it's just been great to see the growth from when we first met to where you are now, and what a joy that is. You always have a smile and an energy that picks people up, so thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Larry. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's guest as much as I did. And remember, you can get the show notes from today's episode over at maryloukaser.com/Larry. I would also so appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to leave me a quick 5-star review on iTunes so more people can find this program and benefit from the wisdom my guests share. I look forward to seeing you on future episodes. In the meantime, make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count at maryloukaser.com.